If you're advocating,
Good evening, one and all. And well, tonight it's great to be a UCF night because UCF is moving on in the NIT after absolutely demolishing the Florida Gators 67-49 in Gainesville for this first round of NIT matchup. They're going to be moving on to the second round for the first time since 2017. And Kyle Nash, I think I just heard the sounds of a season getting redeemed and the silencing of a good sect of UCF fanatics this evening.
buddy, let me tell you what, if it's giving me snarky Bryson Turner, I am here for it. Absolutely. No, and listen, I'll be clear. I didn't know exactly what to expect, and if I'm being honest, see what you about Carl Castle. Is it Castleton or Castleford? I don't know. I'm getting it wrong because I see Rusty Shackelford already in the comments and it threw me off. But the punchline is this: that presence not being there, I know that Gator fans are going to point to it and it's significant, but even still, 18 points, Castleton. There you go. Thank you, Mike. I appreciate that. But the punchline being this. So you try to make a joke about Shackelford and stuff, but someone's there. Hey, I like our commenters like that because if I was screwing it up, I had it taken care of. That's what I'm talking about. But yeah, Castleton not being there, certainly a big part if you are a Gator fan. But as you said, it's great to be a UCF night here in the postseason, one that the Knights didn't even know they were going to have at one point. I heard a story, Bryson, during the availability before the Knights left, that CJ Kelly had said he had booked a flight to go home, and then he got the call from coach, and he had to cancel his flight instead to get on a bus to head to Gainesville.
Yes, I remember. I watched the availability you have with Johnny before he left for Gainesville, and it was really interesting to hear about getting all of the guys back. I mean, it's almost something cinematic about it when you really think about it because
Bryson,
you have
where did you watch that?
any sports movie ever.
No, I mean more the availability you're talking about that. Did you happen to see that on Black and Gold Banner at YouTube? Bing!
There you go. You just wanted to do the shameless plug. Okay.
Right.
Look, well, technically, people should be watching the live stream on this right now. So maybe you're just preaching to the choir there, Kyle.
You know what?
But
Nothing wrong with citing your work, young Bryson. You should know better.
So, digression aside,
Right.
so in the Johnny Dawkins availability that is on the Black and Gold Banner YouTube channel.
Bing!
Thank you. So, Johnny was talking about about bringing everybody back, and there was almost something cinematic about that because you get started to the season with some promise with that Oklahoma State game, then you have this recent kind of thing with this Dark Night of the Soul sort of thing going on here where Michael Durr is hurt. And it doesn't look like you're going to make the NIT. You had the opportunity. You thought you could do it with a really good run in the tournament, and that doesn't work out all the way that you want to. Then all of a sudden, oh my gosh, we have a shot, and it's against the team that we're rivals with in a sense, in the Florida Gators. And then you come here and you absolutely demolish them. I mean, Hollywood could not write a script like that, or they totally would. Totally would. But
listen,
the point here is
that he wouldn't write this, baby.
The point here is that we've said this on the Black and Gold Banneret podcast, and thank you. And I think we'll say this again. This game, I think, recontextualizes a lot of this entire season, at least in terms of its legacy, right, Kyle?
Oh, absolutely. And listen, you mentioned the availability before. The pair of words, the phrase, if you will, used throughout it, whether it be by CJ Kelly, by Taylor Hendricks, right? Not just older players, fifth-year guys, even though CJ Kelly is a transfer, he's a veteran, right? Or whether it be NBA lottery predicted freshman, or even the coach himself, the words new life were prolific throughout the availability there when we were talking to him. And it was basically a mantra for the team in getting ready for what it was. They were treating it like, rather than an extension of the season, but yet another season. Like, as much as nowhere else more than basketball do you hear about, oh, that's a new season, that's a new season. The tournament in itself, the conference tournament, was declared a new season. So too was this. And I asked CJ Kelly what it meant to him to have these guys play together one more time. And, he had mentioned how forward he was looking to it, but he also said to me, hopefully it's more than just one more time. he got that tonight for sure.
Mike Doty mentioned since 2021, UCF men's basketball is 24-17 versus the big three Florida schools in Florida, FSU, and Miami. Not just basketball, though, because not only did Florida beat FSU in the beginning of the season, UCF baseball swept FSU today by winning game today. Look, Kyle, I know what you're going to say. I know you're
I
saying,
didn't say nothing. I just took a deep sigh as you segmented the stickball. That's on you,
look,
baby.
we are. Look, all I'm saying is it feels like the kings of Florida. Florida. There's another topic, actually from that availability I would like to ask you about. So, look, Jalen Young, I noticed that he got some playing time tonight. Just in case anybody hasn't gone and watched that video, in which case, why haven't you seen it yet?
Get a hold of your life.
The Kyle, why don't you explain to the good people that might know, hey, Jalen Young said he was going to enter the transfer portal, but then he played 8 minutes in today's game.
Right. Yeah, he is transferring. That's been made clear. But as you see more and more happen, and I mean, listen, the transfer portal and NIL piece, the transfer portal has always been a thing in sports that aren't football for a longer time. Eric Lopez constantly reminds us of that, and that is a fair point. But now in the world of NIL and other things, and where the transfer portal has become even more prominent in sports that aren't football, this occurrence of, hey, I entered the transfer portal, but I'm finishing in the tournament. Whether, for those that are more football familiar than they are basketball familiar, it's just the same way. Like you've seen the increase in, he's entered the transfer portal, but he's playing the bowl game. It's the same concept. And Jalen Young did that today and had a pretty good contribution, not for nothing.
So looking into the game itself a little bit more, I think the biggest thing in this stat sheet that we really want to point out is take a look at this difference in the field goal percentage between UCF and Florida. I mean, man, looking at CJ Kelly with the 21 points and going 9 of 13, 21 points. Speaking of CJ Kelly, I mean, he has now had 3 straight games, all in postseason play, mind you, where he's gotten over 20 plus points. I mean, I know you talk about taking advantage of your last year, but man, CJ Kelly is really living his last days as a collegiate basketball player to the fullest.
Right, absolutely. And listen, I know as much as Taylor Hendricks even too had a scoring element that wasn't there against Memphis in their what would be their final game in the conference tournament, and everybody was crushing him. Even though, hey, in a bad game where you have 9 rebounds, I'm sure most coaches will take it in the NBA if you do that. But that being said, him having the opportunity to come back and just take charge on the floor. Listen, Florida did not have an answer for Taylor Hendricks. And I'll grant UCF maybe didn't have a super big answer for Riley Kugel, as he's done a great job as a freshman in his own right. I want to take nothing from him. There's a reason why he was the main and arguably the only big force for the Gators on the day. But Hendricks went absolutely off, and this is kind of the aggressive play that I think that both Jeff Sharon and Eric Lopez have called for on the podcast.
Well, I think the other big factor that you really have to think about this is, and you mentioned it a little bit earlier at the top of the show, is Colin Castleton not being here really changed the entire way the Florida Gators played this game. I was listening to the broadcast because I was driving back from the baseball game, and they kept talking about the absolute mismatch that was Taylor Hendricks's matchup. I believe he was facing Richard, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
So an absolute mismatch in that matchup that really caused Hendricks to go absolute hog wild in the paint.
I mean, I can't tell you this, putting somebody 6'4" on Hendricks isn't going to go well for you. Heck, I'm 6'5", and I feel like I'm just dominated by this. I'm going to call him a kid because he's less than 20, and I'm over 40, and he's just like, obviously respectfully doing so, saying hi, but I am, I have to adjust camera angles when he walks up. That's all I'm saying. You'll see me do that on the YouTube every now and again, and not just for the availability this past week.
So let's break down a little bit with Taylor Hendricks' performance, because I think one of the big standouts, and even though it occurred when UCF was already up by a lot in the later portions of the game, but that chase down and the blocking of the power dunk, I
Sure.
mean, that's looking like LeBron James in the NBA Finals type of play right there.
Yeah, coming up from behind to make the play when like at first I heard the thunk thinking he made the dunk, and sure enough, that wasn't the case. By the way, not the only power dunk rejection on the night there, Bryson Turner. You got to understand, earlier in the game, it was far more in play. He made an excellent play like that at the rim. And listen, that's what guys who are, if there are NBA teams, franchises looking at Taylor Hendricks as much as we suspect, right? That's the kind of play they want to see. They want to see a motor. They want to see a dude that doesn't quick. And Taylor Hendricks is that.
Yeah, I mean, and heck, I mean, we talk about CJ Kelly. Taylor Hendricks could very much be living his last days as a collegiate player to the fullest, considering the where he is positioned in mock NBA drafts. And I mean, if NBA scouts, I imagine, have to be impressed with his performance tonight. But it's not just the power dunking. I mean, going 8 for 11 with 8 rebounds. I mean, we were talking before we went live, and you were mentioning how you really wanted him to have a triple double on them, but
I kind of expected, well, yeah, it's not that I wanted it. I kind of expected it to happen. Then I looked down and saw Lehat Tune had 10 rebounds. You know, I know he had a pretty bad miss earlier in the game, but again, if you're having a bad offensive day and you make up for it with 10 boards, okay, you did a good job from where I sit, you know, and especially as a guy who's a backup.
So looking. So now Atheel Horton. Let's not get lost in the fact that we also have Atheel Horton, who also did a pretty great job tonight as well, with 12 points, 5 of 10 from the floor, 2 of 6 from the free throw line, from the 3-point line. I will say that. And if you remember, there was that one moment near the end where he tried to get a little cute with it. And I believe I heard from the broadcast that Johnny Dawkins was shaking his head right there. But I mean,
They cut to it a minute after the dude said that, and he was still, no, you didn't. No, you know, so like, listen, for you mentioned that moment, Bryson Turner. Here's the good news, though, if you're Johnny Dawkins, which, by the way, I'm sorry, I'm a little uncomfortable. My rear end's a little numb because my seat isn't very hot anymore. But see what I did there? But with Dawkins, listen, this was Johnny Dawkins style basketball, right? You got 3 scores in double digits, and defense made the difference. I know the final number has 10 steals for Florida, but that wasn't really how the game at whole went, right? Understand that UCF had forced the Gators into 9 turnovers in the first 10 minutes alone. What I'm seeing here is more kind of them just kind of goofing off with the basketball toward the end. The Gators did finish with a 6-0 run, but let's face it, by then the game was out of pocket, and really the discipline toned down a touch because these guys were excited to get that win. I'm sure Johnny Dawkins will have something to say about it after the game, maybe at least in passing, about them not playing the full allotment. But hey, listen, if you're a coach, you got to find little things to nitpick at and focus on, so that they don't get too full of themselves after beating a Gator team by 18.
You're right, and it certainly helps the fact that they got 40 points while they were in the paint in order to do that. And I want to bring up Colin Castleton again, because I mean, not just from defending Taylor Hendricks, but just defending anybody really coming into the paint. UCF absolutely went all over this Gators team in the paint. And I know you mentioned how Florida fans are going to go on their rooftops and scream to the heavens that Colin Castleton would have made the difference. But how much do you think that's a deal? Do you think that maybe if Castleton were here, things would have turned out differently for the Gators? Or do you think that no? I think this shows what the UCF would have done even with Castleton.
You know, maybe the game would have been closer with Castleton. I'll grant that. I'm not here to say he makes up for an 18-point difference. Like, because if he's on the floor, let's say he puts up, what, you think he's going to get 10 points? You think he could have dropped UCF's production by 10? I'm not seeing that. The biggest, I don't think Castleton cleans up the 3-point shooting, right? Which for my money is the main reason UCF pulled away the way they did, right? You've already cited the field goal percentage, Bryce, and they were so worried about the 3 and chucking it from the cheap seats. Now, let's put it this way. Castleton's in there. We have any reason to believe that Hendricks doesn't deny Castleton? I think what it may end up doing with the game being closer is actually making up for Riley Kugel to have a few more points. Maybe he gets to 20. Okay. and maybe that closes the rebound numbers a little bit more. But at the end of the day, I don't think it does enough to overcome an 18-point deficit. They were having too much trouble at the top of the key early, handling the ball, right? The edge defender and all that coming. There were problems there, a lot of double teams, a lot of things that UCF was doing high, away from the ball, away from Castleton, that influenced this game.
So looking now, you talked about how you said that you expected Taylor Hendricks to have a triple double. Well, the big reason he didn't is double double. The reason he didn't is because Lahat Chun went and stole all those rebounds. He ended up getting to double digits in rebounding tonight on 10, just getting 2 points, 1 for 6 on there. Can you talk about what Lahat was doing there? Because I remember seeing him. His offensive performance maybe wasn't all the way cracked up to be, but he just was a force down there on the boards.
Right, and that's what I think Castleton would have changed. I don't think Lahat Thune would have been in a position to dominate boards like that. I think that would have been Hendricks' number instead. And, with the pull away, that's the reason why he has 22 minutes. I don't know the maximum number of minutes that Dawkins has used him this year, but that's the main reason why he has 22 of them in a tournament game, is because they pulled out to that big lead. Taking nothing from Lahat Thune, he's a great backup, but let's put it this way. If Castleton's in there and Castleton made it as close as Gator fans would have you believe it might have been with him in there, that's the only thing I think that changes. Lahat Thune was the guy that benefited from being in there and getting bigger numbers. It was kind of like, when UCF hosted Temple. Michael Durr wasn't playing. He was hurt. He was put in there to battle not Jameer Nelson. I'm sorry. The center who transferred, I'm forgetting his last name.
Jameer Reynolds.
Reynolds, thank you. Jameer Reynolds. And he was battling in that game, had a high rebound number there because he was, again, his own teammate being hurt was the issue with Michael Durr being out, right? Now, instead of getting more time on the floor, he got more time on the floor because somebody else wasn't there on the opposite side. It's the same concept, even though it's Durr being out for UCF versus a Florida player being out of play, but it's that lack of force and that opportunity for Thune to get more minutes that really translated to that. At some point, if you're a big body that's there filling a space, at some point stuff's going to come to you, and Thune took advantage here.
So UCF, I believe it was counted as a 5th seed in this tournament, correct?
Yes.
Okay, I just want to make sure because for some reason I think when I looked at the bracket, they only
don't show it. Yeah, it's weird. I had to think about. I had to math a little bit too. Okay, wait. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and then that's higher. Yeah, it's 5. So even when you asked me, I did that in my head. So, but yeah, they're 5th.
So, do you think then that the Gators were a little misseeded? Do you think maybe it's because Castleton was around and that with Castleton they would have been more of like a 4th NIT seed team? Or
it's possible. I mean, he wasn't really missing until February 15th, from what I understand. So that's late enough in the season to where the shift in what would have happened would have been relatively low, right? It's late in the season. And how much they would factor the conference tournament in their assessment is a thing, but that's a perfectly plausible statement. Yeah. And I don't know what else to add to that. Yeah. It's a late season injury, which means the impact was minimal as far as their standing, but big in the game tonight.
So looking over at the playing time, because I am interested in the fact that Lahat Thune actually ended up getting more minutes on the court than Michael Durr, and I just was intriguing. Do you think that Johnny Dawkins is just trying to cycle more, like keep his forwards fresh or keep his forwards fresh on this? Because I just noticed the playing time differential in that.
No, that's a good eye that Durr doesn't have 20 minutes, but what you're seeing is the transition from pounding the ball and attacking to realizing Hendricks is dominating so much without help, and they don't really have anybody to help. At some point, I think Dawkins just kind of rolled the dice and pushed it to see what would happen. And then, granted, putting less on Durr, I know he had the hand injury and all that, and he's trying to keep him fresh for a next game. If you have that opportunity as a coach, that's great. Durr's a big part of the team. We remember that stretch of games where he was out and UCF was regularly giving up great games of greater than 70 points, which is a big problematic stat for UCF when they're playing, right? They're more the likelihood for them to win jumps incredibly when they give up more than 60 points, right? So from that standpoint, saving Durr makes some sense. I'm with you. But as far as the strategy in this game, he saw Taylor Hendricks dominating. He saw him doing it physically. So at that point, so much was focused on what Hendrick was doing down low. He wasn't shooting a lot of threes, as you see there, right? But one or two to make sure, to remind him, hey, I can do it, And then with that in mind, he was dominating so much low, he may not have needed too much of a bigger presence. Dawkins goes with a smaller lineup. They crash and make sure that they miss 23-pointers. That's basically how it kind of forms up in my mind.
You are watching the Night Shift as we talk about this UCF men's hoops victory over Florida in the first round of the NIT. And now we get to bring in Stat Boy Drew, Andrew Glukop, into the chat. Drew, what are your thoughts, man? Man, what a game.
We've seen UCF's defense clamp down before, but we often didn't get to see the offense really deliver. So you got a complete game here. The magic number was always 70. If UCF can keep an opponent under 70, you got a legitimate shot to win. I mean, you keep them under 50, you're going to win the game. This Florida team looked absolutely shell-shocked at how physical the defense that UCF brought. I mean,
especially the perimeter, yeah.
Yeah, and Taylor Hendricks' blocks at the rim, man, those are demoralizing blocks. Especially when you have like a clear shot for a dunk, and all of a sudden the hand of justice just comes and just swats it away.
Justice.
I mean, that's demoralizing. And on your own home court in Gainesville for Florida, I mean, they were beaten in all aspects of the game. The only thing that you could say that Florida won it was the bench game. UCF bench didn't really do all that much. And Brandon Suggs was really the highlight of the day, and he had a serviceable game, but everyone else was just it was quiet.
Hey, Tina had 10 rebounds. That matters, damn it.
It did, but oh man, his struggles in point blank range.
Always some hater out there just focused on the. He missed that shot. Oh,
but it's not even missed that shot. I mean, you are point blank. There's a certain point. It's like, really, guy, come on. You got to at least make some of those. I know that the 10 boards is great, but you can't be a liability on their side, because remember, you're not always going to get this kind of defensive performance. So, he's not a shooter.
Well,
when you're in the paint like that, you got to convert layups.
You may always get this defense, but you won't always see this much offense converting it. And that goes to your point about how you had that explosion of offense to match the defense, Drew, right?
Mm-hmm. I mean, it was a complete game for them. Granted, it was only 67 points, but look, you shoot over 50%. You had yourself a good day. 40% from 3-point arc. You can never complain on a 40% beyond the arc. That's always a great number. They were efficient. Between Hendricks and CJ Kelly, who just were really efficient with the ball. When that ball went in the air, it was going in largely. They didn't make like really stupid shots. It was a very controlled game. It was methodical, and it's like, hey Taylor, we're not going to give you the American Athletic Conference Freshman Player of the Year. Well, he took that personally.
Yeah.
Oh heck no! Yeah.
There's the Jordan comparisons right there. So Drew, I want to ask, because you mentioned this Florida team was shell shocked, but Kyle, right before Drew came on, you mentioned that they have been without their SEC All First teamer Colin Castleton for about a month now. So, right. Drew, what are your thoughts on the fact that like this team was shell shocked, even though that arguably a large reason for the performance that they had is they've been without Colin Castleton, who's been out for about a month.
I mean, injuries are part of the game. We know that. UCF is not without should have been a vital piece of this team. Obviously, CJ Walker really hasn't played much at all this year. Dealt with injuries, and then the season ended. But he was supposed to be an important part. Major impact player on defense and the rebounding and block shots. But injuries are part of the game, and the question is, how do you adapt to it? Florida struggled. They kind of faded down. Down the stretch. Losing your best player will do that. At this point, they kind of backed in. to the tournament, much kind of like UCF did, but UCF is actually in a very good spot. They outplayed Memphis in their game. They also outplayed themselves in that game and made a lot of unforced errors, which cost them to lose that game. You had a lot more control. You didn't see 8 turnovers by a single player this time. They were a lot more focused. And I think going to the postseason into a tournament was a chance to hit the reset button. And I think that has a lot of value here. It's a whole new game. What happened in the regular season, all that stuff, where you're standing with, doesn't matter now. Now it's just survive and advance. And these guys care. They care. This may be the NIT, but they care about it, and they're gonna go all the way as far as they can go.
I mean, they're surviving and thriving right now, I'd say, Drew.
Well, it's first round. You get some confidence built here. As we saw with Rutgers in the first round versus Hofstra, they being a number 1 seed in the NIT doesn't mean anything in the grand scheme of things because Rutgers lost. Who knows what happens? They're obviously playing today. Oregon, the more likely situation is UCF will have to travel to Eugene. But if the Ducks lose, UCF gets a home game in round number 2. They're number 5, so there's still possibility of them of having some home games left before traveling potentially to Vegas.
I saw. I do want to get into that a little bit. So that means that UCF could potentially be hosting in the second round if UC Irvine is able to pull the upset. Of course, that Oregon UC Irvine game is going to be tipping off at 11 p.m. So if anyone wants to stick around, stay up and stick around to see that, that's going to be a late night for you. But what are your thoughts on that potentiality of UCF potentially hosting UC Irvine, or do you think, do we not have to worry about about UCF going to Oregon? Because, like you said, being a number 1 seed in the NIT isn't really mean anything.
Well, it's not a guarantee. There's no guarantees here. Anything can happen. But the truth is, you got to go with the more likely situation. The more likely situation is they'll travel west. Obviously, it'll be a late night game. They'll plan ahead for that. But it's postseason. Look what's going on at Cincinnati. Virginia Tech is beating them at halftime. Game on. Enough said.
Kyle, what are your thoughts about the second round potentialities for this team?
Hey, all I'm saying is there's even some UCF fans that'll be cheering against Irvine to assure that UCF doesn't host a game because it'll ruin their narrative about Johnny Dawkins and his hot seat.
Well, I can tell you the hot seat is pretty much gone now that they've gone to the fire at the end of this year.
Well, the moment the moment they made the postseason, Drew, I think that I'm going to speculate that the powers that be in UCF's office there with Terry Mohajir and weren't going to do any of that.
Probably not. But yeah. I'm just saying this cements it.
I mean,
sure. But I mean, there's going to be those UCF hater fans out there, and we're well aware of some of the voices out there. Certainly, you see them on the socials and all that. Honestly, I think at this point, after this win, they're going to be like, well, they'll be like the Florida fans. Well, if they had Castleton, it would be different. Well, okay, look at this scoreline. I don't think
play to win the game.
Right, Herm, you get it. But then if they win the second round, they're just going to keep moving the goalpost at this point. We're going to say it one more time here, like we've said many times on the Black and Gold Banneret podcast. Bing! At the price you're paying him, you're not going to get a better coach than Johnny Dawkins. Period. Point. Story.
Just look at the broadcast. I mean, this guy he actually has a lot of clout in college football. See it in the broadcast. They're talking him up big time. That's not coincidence. I mean, he's well known, and I would not be surprised. Now comes knocking, because it's no secret that UCF as a school does not support basketball.
It makes sense to me. But I mean, when you look at what Johnny Dawkins has done here because look, I think that during a little later on when it got things to a little later on in the year, people started to expect a lot out of a team that had no expectations in the beginning of the season because of how many players they lost. Coach Dawkins had to essentially assemble a whole new team. We've kind of gone over this a couple of times on the Black and Gold Banneret podcast. But I think what this game really does, I mean, you look at the performances here, and the big three here, or really big four, if you really want to think about it, of Horton, CJ Kelly, Taylor Hendricks, and Lahat Chun.
Well, let's not go that far.
Well, Lahat Chun with the rebounds because he was good on the boards, but Horton, Kelly, and Hendricks, all four of those guys were brought in over this offseason alone that Johnny Dawkins recruited these people, and they're pieces to where this team is getting to right now.
Well,
wait a minute, Bryson Turner. Johnny Dawkins can't recruit. What are you talking about? I hear that from UCF fans all the time.
Let's be honest here. Here's the truth. Here's the truth about this. Last year and the year before, team, had some guys who he actually scaled it down a little bit on the raw talent outside of Hendricks. Kind of scaled it down a bit on the transfers and got guys who fit, and you're seeing better chemistry.
Right. You got to remember though, there was a number of situations last year that were awkward too in their own right. Guys that were talking about transferring, and even in Brandon Mahan's case, were in the portal for a bit.
That's what I mean. I'm talking about comparing last year and the year before's team to today's team.
Right.
They may not have as much top end star power. I take Hendricks out of it.
Drew, I think you got to lose cable or something, man. You keep poking in and out with your audio.
Oh, me?
Yeah, you. I mean, because hey, listen, for once, I'm trying to pay attention to you when I can't.
Well, this is first. You heard it here, folks. He's finally trying to pay attention to me.
I'm on record.
Yeah, I'll admit, I was like worried that it seems like it was me, but yeah. So, but Kyle, I want you to kind of get on this right here because Dawkins, because the line of thinking I was going at here is that Dawkins had already recruited these people, and in my opinion, that alone should get people to get off of him about the job security thing. Because no, I don't think it takes a special coach, in my opinion, to go from having like barely a team, like 4 people coming back. And one of them, of course, we later learned it gets hurt. So technically for this season, for playing purposes, he only had 3 players coming back. And then he goes on the recruiting trail and gets all these different players and does even like just the job that he's done with them to make them look like contenders at all.
Well, Bryson, let me explain a major thing about guys being hurt earlier on, like, because I think you're citing CJ Walker there. Don't forget Ty Freeman, and Coach Dawkins is on record with this, saying at one point Ty Freeman was set to be a member of the starting 5, and he got hurt at some point late in the preseason into the early part of the season, and that's how he eventually didn't end up being a starter, going into those games, right?
Right. So that means that aside from Darius, that means that when you look at Ty Freeman, there were 2 healthy players coming into this. PJ Edwards, who was a bench player the year before, and Darius Johnson. Right. That is it. And so he goes and recruits Theo Horton, threat from beyond the arc. Taylor Hendricks, NBA, enough said. CJ Kelly, who has absolutely gone off in the past couple of games in the postseason. Jalen Young, who stepped up early in the season to take over when Darius Johnson himself would get hurt in the middle of the season. Michael Durr, when he's healthy is of course on the board to complement Hendricks. All of these different players that Dawkins was able to bring in, and the fact that he made them almost look like contenders at all, and the type of conference that the American is, alone should have really gotten people to get off Dawkins' back. But unfortunately, they run into adversity in the injury category. Michael Durr gets hurt, Darius Johnson gets hurt, and yada yada. They're in an American Athletic Conference that has the likes of Houston and Memphis in it, yada yada yada, and they don't make the NCAA tournament. So now So, and now you're thinking, like, oh man, now what? But now they go against Florida, and now what may, at least on the record book, might show an average to okay season. Now you have this, and I bring up the 2021 football season that ended in the Gasparilla Bowl, where UCF beat Florida, and that really inflated the legacy of that season because of that victory over Big Brother Florida. I think now with this and moving on into the NIT, if people weren't already off the Fire Dawkins train, then they have to be off of it by this point, right?
Well, no, they won't be because they're that stubborn about it, and they're going to be always frustrated because, they're not in the big dance as opposed to the NIT and blah, 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 blah. Hashtag them problem. Punchline's this. Here's, with all the points you make about recruitment and seeing what this group did, I'll say this. This was the note to go out on. This is what this team could have done if they didn't have the injuries, they didn't have any of the other troubles that you're talking about, and frankly, if Dawkins doesn't recruit this well, they don't have any of that. I think that's the point you're making pretty free and clear. By the way, when you're about to lose an NBA guy, okay, and then you're going to go into the Big 12, you're going to need a guy that can recruit like that. And, who knows? Maybe Taylor Hendricks will be inclined to stay one more season to build his stock. I'm not saying anything that's a guarantee, but like the best case scenario from UCF's perspective would be that. Obviously, I don't see that happening. So, yeah. I guess that's where I'll leave it. The people who aren't convinced on Johnny Dawkins right now coaching at least the first year of the Big 12 weren't ever going to get off the hot seat bandwagon for him.
So now, of course, at this point, and I want to bring up, by the way, Jessica Sheldon commented, I did some research, and I am in the Johnny Dawkins can stay as long as he wants camp. I have been too hard on Dawkins, but he has done a lot for UCF. So yeah, I think now I think that really puts it into perspective right there. I mean, a lot of people have been hard on Johnny Dawkins. I mean, when you look at the support, Drew's mentioned it. When you look at the support that UCF gives to its basketball schools, the fact that they are able to have a coach like Johnny Dawkins for the amount of money, I mean, I would argue that Johnny Dawkins is the biggest bargain you will find in the grocery store that is college basketball head coaches.
Yeah, I think that's clear. Don't you, Drew?
Well, let's look at UCF as a whole. In their time in Division I, their history into the 90s before Kirk Speraw took over, UCF was arguably the worst program in Division I. I mean, they were bad, and they made bad teams look good. This was a program where coaches went to die as far as their career.
You historians like the Eric Lopez's and the Jeffs, you are joining that UCF was so bad.
Oh, they were terrible. And they get the NCAA tournament with a losing record. So they just happened to get hot at the end at the conference tournament, getting side of some runs here and there. The only time they made the NCAA tournament prior to getting the at-large with Johnny Dawkins is when Atlantic Sun was not a good conference. It was basically someone had to come from it, and eventually UCF outgrew the conference. But remember, when they went from the ASUN to Conference USA, they struggled. So I mean, it's expected that you're going to see struggling joining the Big 12, but you got to be patient and allow the trajectory to build up.
Well, and define struggling too, Drew. Like, we've seen instances, and I've heard guys, in waiting for availabilities with Johnny Dawkins and other, media dudes out there, have this conversation and make this point every time. Hell, we've made it on the Black and Gold Banner Rip podcast. Bing! Define struggling. If you are middle of the pack in the Big 12, you still have a fighting chance to make the tournament. Now, granted, one would argue it's because the competition is that much more difficult, but at the end of the day, define struggling, right?
Well, I would say a losing record.
Right. If they go 500 and still make the tournament, if you dominate out of conference, struggle, or yeah, if you dominate out of conference, struggle a little bit in conference, you're up. Your ranking and your net are going to be just fine. So then you see
and if
let's not forget, by the way, on the topic of UCF basketball history, the fact that UCF has now beaten Florida for the first time since I believe it was 2010 or allegedly, because according to the NCAA that game never happened.
Well, it was a forfeited game, so I mean we know it did happen, but the official record.
The forfeit happened.
Forfeits work. The losses stay, wins disappear. But the game's online. I put it there.
Hey, like you said, Pepper, the NCAA may not remember, but Pepperidge Farms remembers.
Pepperidge Farms remembers. Hey, by the way, Drew, it's kind of like the holiday special for Star Wars, right?
Ooh.
Oh man!
Between that and Highlander 2.
That's the look of every UF fan as we talk about 2010 right now.
Oh yes, I'm sure that UF fans are now getting the chance to kind of feel what we felt during the 2018 Fiesta Bowl right there. Like, oh, if only we had this guy, then things would have been different. I mean, look,
they were 16-16 or
18, yeah, right.
They were a 500 team going into post, even if they won a couple extra games. I mean, this was still not a great team.
Their record was 500. Pepperidge Farms remembers.
Yeah, Pepperidge Farm remembers all the things that have been done wrong to them.
Yeah, I mean, you still look. The point is that you still have Riley Kugel, who all SEC freshman team right there. You have something you just absolutely demolished, like Drew said. Florida was shell-shocked tonight.
But let's give Florida a little credit. They'll probably be better next year. I believe that's definitely a possibility for them.
Well, yeah, they don't really have any top-end guys that played here with the idea of going to the NBA. Mm-hmm. So they're either going to transfer out, they're going to stick numbers. Kugel was the only one who had double figures. And he had to go 4 of 12. I mean, it was just, and a lot of it was just shots that just wouldn't fall. I mean, there were some good looks that just didn't go in.
There were plenty of contested looks too.
Yeah, well, but there is a degree of luck involved. In fact, I believe Jeff looked into it, and like someone did an analysis and said like UCF's like the 4th unluckiest team in Division One this year.
Yeah,
that was Elo's edition of the Black and Gold Banneret podcast, where he interviewed such an analyst. I forget the gentleman's name.
It was a guy who did a thing about some stuff.
No, he was a guy who was calling conference tournament games with the.
Are you talking about the one with Kevin Brown?
Kevin Brown. There you go. Thank you, sir. Yeah, it was him that dropped that stat. I forget where Kevin Brown got that stat from, but it was on that episode of the Black and Gold Banneret.
And look, it was true. Like possession losses, and how many were points scored in the last 2 seconds that cost UCF the game. I mean, there was a lot of bad luck there, and sometimes it's better to be lucky than good. Start falling, it only takes you so far.
I mean, you mentioned unlucky, Kyle. Do you think that maybe that UCF's luck is potentially turning around a little bit now? Because now we just await the end. Right now we're awaiting the start because it's starting so late of the Oregon and UC Irvine game. So, do you think the UCF's this team's luck is maybe turning around for the better, and what kind of thing? What do you think this win will do for them going forward? Because you got to win against your rival, but it was a pretty handily win. I mean, you don't really want to have them resting on their laurels, no matter if you're going to host UC Irvine or travel to Oregon, right?
And not at all. There's no reason to believe that whoever UCF's playing is going to have a missing asset like a Colin Castleton on the roster like that, right? Because whoever's missing dudes is going to get exposed theoretically in this round. So, they won't have the late game partying that they do in the fourth quarter area, air quotes, of the contest, which is, why the numbers kind of trail off the way they do late. especially including a 6-0 run to wrap the game by the Gators. But I'll say this, unless a team comes in and completely finds a way to both physically dominate Durr and CJ Kelly, excuse me, not CJ Kelly, Taylor Hendricks, but I'll put CJ Kelly in there as an oversized guard as well. If they find a way to completely physically dominate those guys and somehow if they take Hendricks and Durr out, dominate down low, and Ithiel Horton struggles shooting to where they only have CJ Kelly left really as a shooter, that's when UCF's going to struggle, right? We've said this, or I've said this before, at least on the podcast and throughout the season. Ithiel Horton is kind of a streaky guy. He's definitely a Tasmanian devil type where he could tear through a defense, but how much damage he does with a completed shot at the end is going to be what decides it. And I'm not here to say that Ithiel Horton's a bad player, but he is streaky. And when he gets hot, look out. When he's not, he keeps shooting to try to break out of the funk, which isn't a bad practice, but sometimes that goes well, like in this game, and sometimes it doesn't.
Drew, your thoughts on the same question?
Well, I kind of more of the fact of, with the shooter, sometimes they want to shoot to break out of the funk, like Kyle said.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes you only have so much time and margin of error to be able to do that before you run out of chances. So sometimes you gotta pull back. And this was an opportunity here, like Horton was a little streaky today, 5 of 10. He got hot, he got cold, he got hot, he got cold. But when you have guys like CJ Kelly and Taylor Hendricks who are just absolutely on fire, you could scale back and allow the other guys to take over and be a decoy. There's nothing wrong with being the decoy. The scouting reports are out there. They know you're a shooter. So you know what? If it isn't working, don't be a shooter and make them think you'll be a shooter. And that just opens the thing up.
Go ahead and dunk on an alley-oop instead, right, Taylor Hendricks?
Yeah. Results speak. He is just score. It doesn't matter how the team scores. They just got to do it. So you know what? Pull back. They expect you to shoot. Don't. And you know what? Over time, you'll get your opportunities. So it's not just heaving the ball up. It's also just finding your opportunities to where you can build the confidence up.
So I don't want to go and make the mistake that a lot of people made, where putting expectations on this team. But what do you? But now that that UCF has gotten to this point, gotten back past the NIT first round for the first time since 2017. What do we think we can see from this team going forward? Now that going forward, they're going to have to play either Oregon or UC Irvine. But what do you think that we could see them? You think we could see them make like that one run they made the other time they were in the NIT, or what do you think we can see from them later?
Well, here's something you got to keep in mind with the NIT seeding. As I said before, kind of all bets are off. We're seeing instances where chalk is not happening.
Well, and UCF certainly wouldn't be chalk, right? So
yeah,
I mean,
UCF chalk would have had Florida win. Eastern Washington wins. 2 number ones got knocked out. Rutgers got knocked out. Clemson got knocked out. Oklahoma State was losing in the second half and squeezed it out. For things to kind of break down, which is why at this point, once you get out of the first round, it doesn't matter what your seed is. That just really means who hosts who. The only guarantee that we see at this point is UCF will not, because it's either going to be Wisconsin or Liberty or 2 or 3. But as we said before, you play to win the game, and you have to travel to Oregon, or if they at least have the ability, the opportunity to not sit back, but they have a couple days to kind of rest up a little bit, get off the high, and reset, and go in with a clean slate and a clean state of mind. I suppose in the conference, have a chance to take a step back and kind of catch your breath. First rounds, yesterday and today. Second rounds, the 18th and the 22nd for the quarterfinals. So there's gaps, and that makes a difference. That can help a team, and I think that can help UCF.
Well, I'll tell you what, the players may not get a chance to enjoy it for very long, but I mean, a lot of this UCF fan base is going to enjoy the high of a Florida Gator defeat. I mean, women's soccer, women's basketball had it happen. Baseball had a defeat of FSU today. So I mean, football in 2021. I'm telling you what, I feel like the Kings of the Sunshine State today, gentlemen.
Well, hey, maybe instead of saying Big Brother, we should say Blue Blood, because that whole Big Brother thing would imply that they're continuing to win.
Ah, there you go.
The best description is the older brother.
Fair.
Now, I'd like to point out, my brother is 5 years older than me. He's smaller than me.
Hey, I'll tell you this. I am the oldest of 3 children, and I am still the shortest in my family. So as someone in that position, I can see that comparison right there.
Don't worry, I'm not going to nickname you Gator. You're good there, Bryson.
Kyle comes up with a nickname for everybody.
All right, well,
he'll give you a nickname.
All right. Well, I think we'll wrap it up here because it's 10:21, and so if anyone wants to head off the bed, they can do that, and if not, they can start prepping to watch the Oregon UC Irvine game, which tips off at 11 p.m. and see who UCF is gonna play this weekend. We still don't know. But once we do, be sure to follow us all on Twitter. You can see it on the screens there. I'm at It's Bryson Turner. Kyle Nash is at the SOTG at the Student of the Game. And Andrew Glukov at StatBoyTrue. Gentlemen, is there any parting thoughts you would like to impart on the viewers this evening?
It's always great to hang out here with you guys on the night shift. But until next time, everyone, class dismissed.
Drew?
Stay tuned for more action.
There you go.
I think that's a perfect way.
And if UCF's hosting, it'll be Sunday. That's right.
See, just $12.
Man, imagine UCF hosting an NCAA tournament, March Madness, and an NIT game in the same weekend.
Orlando, not UCF. Yeah, that's
city. It's in the Amway Center, but UCF is the host in air quotes.
Gotcha.
Yeah, that just means they the UCF people are the ones who are running the game, but like UCF, the team.
Yeah, that'll be.
Means people are going to be working extra hours, and you're going to be busting out those monsters.
Hey, I'm right with you right there. But
Sunday.
It's an exciting basketball weekend here in Orlando, Florida, and it's still gonna be going on as we get ready for whoever UCF is going to play in the second round opponent. Jessica Sheldon said she stayed enough to watch the game, so we'll let her get ready to go and do that. So for Kyle Nass and Andrew Glukov, I am Bryson Turner. Thank you guys so much for watching. Be sure to follow us collectively at UCF Banner at SBN for any and all updates on this developing situation as UCF and Johnny Dawkins advance further on into the NIT. Enjoy the game if you're staying up to watch it. And until next time, go Knights. Charge on.